What if Luffy ate the strongest devil fruit, which I believe to be the Baku Baku no Mi, aka the Munch Munch fruit, a fruit eaten by a lunatic Wapol. Now why is this the strongest devil fruit?
Are you asking me or telling me?
Because it has unlimited potential. Now some would say Wapol's fruits rivals the potential of Joy Boy's fruit, the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika.
Hey! No! Stop! Just calm down! Don't do it!
I just want to give you a brief introduction to this fruit for those who don't really remember the extent of this fruit's power. The Munch Munch fruit has the ability to eat literally anything. Wapol's mouth can extend to any size and then take the raw materials that he's eaten and is able to enhance his own body, incorporating them into his body for 24 hours. This ability also gives you access to the Baku Baku factory, which allows the user of the fruit to create new creations using the best qualities of both of the things consumed. For example, in One Piece, Wapol uses this fruit to accidentally create a new metal called Wapo metal, which is a rare type of metal even used by Frankie to create the General Frankie battle armor. Now what really sold this fruit to me as the strongest was the ability to fuse humans together, which would also include fusing devil fruit abilities.
That's insane.
Now to really explore what would happen if Luffy ate the Munch Munch fruit, we have to address two things. One, the host, and two, the villains. Now as you've already seen from the thumbnail of this video, the host of the Baku Baku no Mi will be Luffy, because he may be a carefree airhead, but to me Luffy is a battle genius. In my eyes, he rivals characters like Goku in terms of fight IQ. For us to get 100% out of this devil fruit, we need Luffy's creativeness. Since this power isn't linear, it simultaneously grows in power depending on the user's ability to think on the spot and problem solve. We have seen Luffy do this time and time again with what we assumed to be just the rubber fruit. Luffy found a way to speed the blood flow in his body, which provides oxygen and nutrients to his body at a faster pace, making him faster and more powerful. Now this only works since his blood vessels are made from rubber and can handle the immense pressure that his body would need to go through. And that's not all. For those who didn't skip the Skypiea arc, Luffy actually has a new form called Gum Gum Airhead, where he literally cuts the oxygen to his brain. In order to evade Enel's observation haki known as Mantra, Luffy becomes unpredictable and similar to a blade of grass, able to avoid all attacks. That's the level of batshit craziness you need to utilize the Baku Baku no Mi. Another reason why Luffy is the perfect host for this fruit is the fact that the weakness is referred to as an insatiable appetite, basically meaning that anyone who eats this fruit will always be hungry. However, have you guys met Luffy? Because he has this defect anyway, with or without the Munch Munch fruit. And with Sanji as his chef, I don't think this will be much of a problem. The reason I think this fits Luffy so well, personality wise, is that it's pretty similar to his Gum Gum fruit. Luffy's mouth will be able to stretch to any size, and he can use the ability to be just as goofy and wacky as he usually is. But when it comes down to locking in, this fruit also allows him to do both. Now you have to bear in mind, since the Baku Baku no Mi is one of a kind, and apart from Blackbeard's fruit Yami Yami no Mi is the only other devil fruit which allows the devil fruit user to have two devil fruit abilities. You see this when Wapol at one point actually swallows his brother Mushuru and was able to incorporate the Spore fruit into his body without killing his brother, which means Luffy on his journey would A, be able to eat any of his companions and be able to incorporate their devil fruits into his own body, but he can also do something which is even funnier and even eat the villains.
You stay away from me? You stay away from me, please?
Now let's not forget, Luffy would now have the option to fuse two of his companions together. This I believe would create great excitement in the crew as they try to constantly fuse together anyway. Exhibit A. Now unlike Dragon Ball Z, this kind of fusion doesn't grow their power, but what it does do is it adds both of the strengths of the two individuals and puts it into one body, making them a formidable opponent.
No.
Let's say as a kid, Luffy growing up in the East Blue, living in the mountains with Ace and Sabo and Dardan, Luffy comes across a weird devil fruit, the Baku no Mi. Obviously at this point, it would look like an oddly shaped fruit, but due to Luffy's curiosity, he would take a bite without hesitation, making Luffy the Munch Man. As a kid, he would be ridiculed and lose his ability to swim. Now since Luffy eats a lot of things, he would transform into a lot of random wacky items, still exploiting the extent of his powers. Similar to Luffy with the Gum fruit, it wouldn't really help his battle prowess and would probably only end up turning into trees or rocks. Now when it comes to him starting his journey to be the king of the pirates, we can pretty much skip past characters like Alvida or Don Krieg, as Luffy pretty much defeats these guys without the help of his devil fruit. Now I'll be focusing on the villains who in my opinion really set the bar for Luffy and challenged him and put him on a different level. The first opponent I'll be talking about is Crocodile, who Luffy will be facing with his Munch fruit. Now Luffy's first confrontation with Crocodile occurred in the desert. Now with Crocodile's Logia ability being sand, I don't think Luffy is winning this regardless. Crocodile is in his element, and realistically speaking, Crocodile was pulling moves which caused Luffy's body to wither when in contact. This was still before Haki, so Luffy couldn't even make contact. Now Luffy would try to eat sand, and he would be able to apply the sand properties to his body. However, with Crocodile's mastery over sand, it just wouldn't help. So in this instance, Luffy would lose, just the way he did the first time around. But Luffy's second encounter with Crocodile would be completely different. Luffy would be prepared and is aware of Crocodile's tactics.
I'm ready. Promotion.
And Luffy, instead of applying the barrel of water to his back, he would consume the barrel of water. And not only that, he would eat anything that has properties including water, for example, a well. Alabaster is very scarce on water, so there weren't many items for him to consume. However, since Luffy's body consumes items and uses it at its best quality, Luffy would be able to release water in a very conserving method, so he doesn't run out of water. I imagine his main body would turn into a barrel with a hose protruding from his body. However, this hose would be able to move around the barrel, so it would be able to squirt Crocodile with water even if Crocodile was behind him. Now Luffy won't have the same range as he did with his Gum fruit, but to make up for that, Luffy would eat the surrounding walls, making Luffy heavier so the Crocodile is unable to push Luffy away as easily as he did with his sandstorms. Luffy would also take less damage as he is now made of bricks and mortar. Luffy would be able to take the walls he had eaten and convert them into armor for his arms and legs. I do think Luffy with the Munch fruit and knowledge of Crocodile's attacks, as well as the internal water spout and skin which is tough as bricks, he would easily be able to defeat Crocodile.
Alright, hey. Alright, good job, guys. Let's just not come in tomorrow. Let's just take a day.
Now the next opponent I'm going to focus on is one of Luffy's greatest opponents, which is Enel in Sky Pier. Enel is another Logia user and ate the Goro no Mi, making him a lightning human. Enel is way too powerful of an enemy for Luffy to face this early on in his journey. The only real way that Luffy had a chance against Enel was due to his body being a natural non-conductor for electricity. However, this time around, Luffy has a normal human body, meaning he is in immediate danger when it comes to facing Enel. Now early One Piece, they focus on devil fruit type matchups, similar to how Pokemon does it. For example, in Pokemon, to keep it simple, fire beats grass, grass beats water, and water beats fire. Now in One Piece, devil fruits work in a similar way. Crocodile, who is a sand Logia user, has a disadvantage to water. Now in a similar vein, Enel has a disadvantage against materials that don't conduct electricity, like rubber, which is why Luffy was able to punch Enel even though Enel was a Logia user. However, Luffy being the Munch man, it does mean that he won't have that same luxury, but Luffy could absolutely eat a material which is able to touch Enel. What would that material be? Well, in Sky Pier he has limited options, but one thing there was an abundance of was gold. Gold is a conductive metal, meaning Luffy would be able to consume it and hit Enel. But because gold is a conductive metal, it would also mean that Enel has a significant advantage as Enel can heat and actually change its shape. We even see this happen in the original encounter, where he traps Luffy's arm in a ball of gold. Now factoring in Luffy's insane perseverance and endurance, he still usually takes a lot of damage in his fights. However, even I don't think Luffy can withstand millions of volts of electricity. However, Luffy can eat multiple items to use them in combination in his body to fend off against this. In Sky Pier, he has access to other materials like wood. However, even though wood is a non-conductive material, it would combust and explode due to the heat. But there is a ton of rock for Luffy to eat and assimilate into his body. A combination of gold and rock could be the way forward. The gold is conductive and allows Luffy to be able to hit Enel. The rock element, though not impervious to electricity, has a higher tolerance, but even rock has its limits and under high voltage can crack or even melt depending on the rock. Now this will probably be Luffy's toughest fight. People underestimate how much Luffy was carried by being rubber in the original timeline. Now let's not forget about Enel's ability, which was Mantra. Enel had observation haki, meaning he could foresee attacks coming from Luffy. However, this is the only element of the fight that I'm not too worried about. Luffy in nature is very unpredictable, and if Luffy isn't 100% sure on what he's doing, then neither will Enel, even with his observation haki.
I see this as an absolute win.
That brings us swiftly on to Lucci. Now Lucci, as tough as he is a more straightforward opponent. Lucci is a Zoan fruit user who ate the cat fruit model leopard, which gives Lucci incredible endurance, speed and power. However, this fight is also Luffy's first appearance of Gear 2nd, which is absolutely iconic. I do believe Luffy by this point would also find a way to get to the next level with his Munch fruit. And I feel like Luffy might still keep the Gears name, as the name comes from gears in a car, which represents speed and going to the next level. Now, what does Gear 2nd of the Munch fruit look like? Well, Wapol does something very interesting in the anime. He eats himself. What? Yes, he eats himself, his entire body, using the Munch factory, and then proceeds to regurgitate himself. However, during that time, Wapol was able to restructure his body in the best way possible, giving him a body better suited for combat, and this just screams Luffy to me. However, I think Luffy would do something very similar. He would eat himself and basically bring out a super Luffy. Now this goes way deeper than you think, since he can restructure his body and bones, meaning he can move muscle to different areas, as well as reorganize his bone structure in order to make him stronger and more agile. However, it doesn't stop there. If Luffy eats anything, for example metal or brick or anything he sees, and then he activates Gear 2nd, which in this sense is consuming himself, he is able to reshape his entire body while factoring in the materials he's already consumed. So that could mean a variety of things, for example metal bones like Wolverine, or bones made from springs which allow him to extend his arms or even his legs. The world is Luffy's oyster, and the best part is Gear 2nd will never be the same. It will be completely reliant on what Luffy has to eat and how Luffy wants to reorganize his body for that battle. Now this is an insane power up, and Lucci wouldn't stand a chance in a pure straightforward fight.
That was easy.
Doflamingo is our next big opponent, which also set a milestone for Luffy's pirate career, and against Doflamingo, Luffy would just struggle, just as he did the first time around. In this fight, Luffy would use Gear 3rd, which when it comes to the Munch fruit would, in my opinion, be something like a vacuum. Luffy would suck air into his mouth, and from his Munch factory, he would suck in items into his stomach, just bits of everything around him. He would then proceed to use these items to form a giant big Luffy, similar to what we saw in the One Piece movie Stampede from Bullet. However, Luffy wouldn't be as big. He would kind of resemble Kevin 11 from Ben 10, just a freaky amalgamation of different materials. Now this form would be able to pack a punch. However, this wouldn't be the end to Luffy's transformation. You see, by this point, Luffy would have been trained by Rayleigh and now would be able to use Haki, so Luffy's mess of a body would start to slowly tone down. While we see Haki being infused with all the components inside of Luffy, Luffy would naturally start to shrink in size as the parts that he had eaten take their place, making Luffy look like an absolute tank. You see, Gear 2nd for the Munch fruit has a lot of variations, so up until this moment, he only had to use Gear 2nd against his enemies, but against Doflamingo, he needed another form. Now this form would give Luffy an incredible power boost, but depending on the items eaten, it might take a toll on Luffy's speed, or even increase Luffy's speed depending. But a bulky Luffy in gear 3rd could tank a lot of damage whilst also dealing a dangerous amounts of damage back to the opponent, which would overwhelm Doflamingo.
Piece of cake, Quill.
This then brings us on to Kaido. Is Luffy's Munch Munch fruit able to contend against the Emperor of the Sea? Well, if we're following the storyline, Kaido before fighting Luffy has already battled Big Mom, the 9 Samurai, his own daughter, whilst also carrying the entirety of Onigashima. So let's just say, similar to the original timeline, Kaido isn't fresh, but still insanely powerful. And this time around, Luffy obviously doesn't have the Nika form gear 5th. However, Luffy has something very similar in power, which is the Munch Munch fruit awakening. You see, by this point, Luffy would have used gear 2nd and 3rd, but Kaido would have defeated each form. Now, considering the Munch Munch fruit is a broken ability without having an awakening, you can only imagine how much more powerful it would get with an awakening. Well, at the moment, Luffy can only eat raw or organic materials. But what if Luffy could eat non-material based things? I'm talking like elemental forces. For example, Kaido using flame breath, Luffy would be able to simply eat it, fire it back at the enemy, or even assimilate it into his own body. Try to wrap your head around how crazy this ability would be. Luffy would be able to eat the very air itself and incorporate its properties into his body. He would literally become the avatar master of all elements. This would only become increasingly broken, especially in the One Piece world, as characters with the Logia fruit abilities are immediately at a disadvantage, as now Luffy would be able to eat any attacks like fire or electricity. Honestly, it's very close to what the Nika fruit can do, but it would all come down to creativity and how Luffy would use that ability. Bear in mind, whatever Luffy can eat would also be used in his body, so for 24 hours, Luffy could potentially even be a Logia user, eating electricity and becoming an electric man. You could even use a combination of elements. The possibilities are endless. However, would it be enough to defeat Kaido? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, guys.